Why Your Life Hurts, 5 Truths No One Else Gets About Dark Chosen One. There's a pain you carry that no one else seems to see, not because it's invisible, but because it doesn't make sense in a world that only recognizes surface wounds. You've walked through days where it felt like your chest was caving in, where the heaviness wasn't connected to any clear event, and yet it was as real as gravity. You've had moments where joy slipped through your fingers, not because your life was broken, but because something deeper inside you kept whispering, there's something more, something hidden, something no one else around me can feel. That ache, that burn, that mysterious grief is not a flaw. It's a signal, a code, a sacred reminder that you are not just different, you are chosen. And not in the sweet cosmic hug way the mainstream talks about. You were chosen in the way that breaks you open, to rebuild you as something the world isn't prepared for. You are what we call a dark chosen one. And the reason your life hurts in ways most people will never understand is because you are carrying truths that were never meant to be easy. The first truth no one else gets is that your pain is not only personal, it's collective. From a young age, you were sensitive to the suffering around you. Maybe you absorbed your family's dysfunction. Maybe you carried the emotional weight of people you barely knew. You thought you were just too emotional, or perhaps even diagnosed as anxious, depressed, overwhelmed. But in reality, you were being initiated into your role. Dark chosen ones are built differently. You don't just feel your own wounds, you transmit the ones buried in the unconscious layers of the human field. You are the place where ignored pain finds a voice, and because of that, you often suffer in silence, unable to explain why you feel so much, so deeply. But here's the secret. Your capacity to feel isn't a curse. It's the proof of your ability to transform, not with words, but with your presence. Your pain is an initiation, and most people can't see that because they haven't lived it.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The second truth is that awakening for a dark chosen one is violent, not externally, but internally. While others are having gentle realizations through meditation or breath work, your awakening may have come as a collapse, a breakup that shattered your identity, a dark night that lasted for years, a moment where everything you built crumbled and you were left naked with your truth. That's not because the universe doesn't waste time with you. You didn't come here to live small, and so your false life had to be burned early. That fire wasn't punishment, it was preparation for something more. But how do you explain to people that the worst moments of your life were actually the beginning of your becoming? You don't. You embody it. Because when you rise from that fire, you don't just become whole, you become a living portal for others who are still burning. The third truth is that your intuition doesn't come as a gentle nudge. It comes as thunder, visions, gut punches, dreams that won't let go, voices in the silence that speak truths you're not sure you're ready to hear. While others are learning to listen to their inner voice, yours has been screaming at you for years. You've tried to ignore it, tried to be normal, tried to play along, but the knowing doesn't go away. Not the considered thinker with delusions, because your intuition isn't just about your life, it's a guidance system built for mission. You see through lies instantly. You know what people really mean even when they say something else. You sense timelines before they happen, and the people around you, they don't always know what to do with that, so they call you dramatic, intense, paranoid. But in time, they always circle back and say, "How did you know?" And you just smile, knowing you've always known, but couldn't explain the map that's built into your body. The fourth truth is isolation. Deep, unrelenting, soul-shaking isolation. Not the kind where you don't have people around, but the kind where you feel like no one sees you, even in a crowd, even among friends. Because how do you explain the way your mind works? How do you share your spiritual downloads when the people closest to you still live in survival mode? How do you be yourself when being yourself has always led to rejection? So you go quiet, you retreat, not because you hate people, but because you feel safer in the dark than you do in small talk. You've probably thought at some point that something must be wrong with you, that maybe you're cursed to walk alone. But what if that loneliness was your crucible? What if it was shaping you into someone who could hold space for others in a way no one else ever held space for you? What if that void wasn't emptiness, but sacred spaciousness for your power to finally rise? And the fifth truth, the one that cuts the deepest, is this: your destiny won't come easy. It won't be handed to you. It won't fall into your lap. Not because the universe doesn't love you, but because you were born to forge your path. While others follow templates, you were born to break them. While others seek comfort, you seek truth. Your life hurts because your soul is heavy with a mission that can't be outsourced, can't be faked, and can't be delayed. You're here to bring through something new, and that means you must become something new, again and again. And that process, it's brutal, but also beautiful, because every time you think you've reached your limit, you break through another layer, you uncover a new depth, and in that depth, you realize the pain didn't come to destroy you. It came to wake you up. So let me ask you something you've probably never asked yourself, in full honesty. What if the reason your life has hurt so much is because you're carrying a light so ancient, so wild, so real, that the darkness had to try and break you early, before you remembered who you are? You were marked since birth what the darkness saw in you that others missed. There are things about you that have never made sense. Not to your family, not to your teachers, not even to yourself. You felt different before you had the words to say it. There was a weight to your presence, a knowing behind your eyes. Maybe you were the kid who asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Maybe you saw things in your dreams before they happened. Maybe you noticed patterns others were blind to, but instead of being celebrated, you were silenced, redirected, labeled, because from the very beginning you were marked. And what marked you wasn't just potential, it was threat. Not a threat to people, but to the system they had been conditioned to survive within. You came in with codes meant to dismantle illusions, and that meant you would never be allowed to fit in comfortably. What no one ever told you is this: darkness always sees you before the world does. It's like a radar. It doesn't wait for you to become powerful. It senses your blueprint, your frequency, your future impact. And the moment you incarnated, the matrix of fear around you registered your presence. You were not born neutral. You were born activated, and that meant resistance came early. Maybe your family couldn't hold space for your sensitivity. Maybe you experienced trauma that tried to shatter your spirit before it could mature. Maybe the world tried to shut you down before you even understood what you were. That wasn't an accident. That was strategic. Because darkness doesn't waste its energy on souls with no mission, it targets the ones who came here to shift everything. If your life has felt like a battlefield, it's not because you're cursed, it's because your light is disruptive at the deepest level. Not the soft, angelic light people post about online, but the furnace light, the kind of light that exposes shadows, cracks, illusions, and sets dormant hearts on fire. That's what lives inside you. And that's what the darkness knew would one day wake up. So it tried to throw you off course, not with obvious distraction, but with subtle numbness, with emotional neglect, with unspoken shame, with internalized guilt. Because the truth is, the most powerful chosen ones don't need to be destroyed. They just need to be disconnected from themselves. If you lose your connection to your essence, you become easy to control. But here's what the darkness always underestimates. It doesn't know how resilient your soul is. It doesn't understand that every trauma you endured became a lesson. Every heartbreak, an activation. Every betrayal, a sharpening. It thought it could weaken you, but it was forging you. Because here's the paradox of the dark chosen one. The very things that were sent to break you became the tools you now hold with surgical precision. The reason you can sense when someone's lying? Because you've been lied to. The reason you can feel when energy is off? Because you've had to survive in unsafe environments. The reason your intuition is so fierce? Because logic failed you when the world wouldn't believe your truth. That's not brokenness, that's refinement. You were marked not just to suffer, but to see. And what you see, energetically, emotionally, psychically, others don't. You notice the cracks in reality. You feel the tension before it erupts. You sense the shift in people's hearts, even when they smile. And because of this, your guidance system works differently. You can't just follow trends or teachings that others follow. Your soul demands truth, precision, depth. And that makes your journey harder. It also makes it holy. But let's go deeper. What if the reason you were marked wasn't just because of what you would become, but because of what you already are in multidimensional time? What if your future self, the version of you that already stepped into full power, is the one sending signals backward through time to keep you from forgetting? What if your dreams, your synchronicities, your inner urges aren't fantasies, but messages from a version of you that the system was designed to keep locked behind fear? This is the game no one tells you about. The darkness doesn't attack you because of who you are in this moment. It attacks you based on the timeline it knows you're here to awaken. And if it can trap you in survival, in self-doubt, in trauma loops, it can delay your impact. Not forever, but long enough to slow the ripple. And that's why you feel pressure inside you that most people never feel. You're not just trying to survive, you're trying to remember something massive, something dangerous to the lie this world is built on. So let me ask you something deeply uncomfortable. If your pain is the proof of your purpose, what does your suffering say about the power you haven't fully claimed yet? That question isn't meant to hurt. It's meant to crack the shell around your remembering. Because you are not here by accident. You are not broken, you are not lost, you are marked. marked for impact, marked for initiation, marked for something so vast that it terrifies the parts of the world still clinging to illusion. And once you realize that everything that's ever hurt you was a portal, not a prison, you begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with authority, not as a victim, but as a vessel. When the light doesn't work, the secret reason your awakening feels like war. No one tells you that awakening doesn't always feel like bliss. For some of us, the deeper the awakening, the darker it gets. We weren't handed peace when we crack open. We were handed truth. And truth doesn't always come dressed in light. Sometimes it comes like a blade. Sometimes it comes like a flood. And for dark chosen ones, truth almost always arrives like war. You've probably tried all the spiritual paths that promised peace. You've lit the candles, said the affirmations, tried to raise your vibration, breathe deeply, think positively, but it didn't stick. Or maybe it worked for a moment, only to collapse beneath the weight of something older, something louder, something deeper. You weren't doing it wrong, you weren't spiritually broken. The reason the light didn't work is because your awakening was never meant to look like theirs. You weren't built to float, you were built to root. And rooting doesn't happen in the clouds, it happens in the underworld. Your path requires shadow. It requires confrontation. It demands that you descend into everything the world avoids. While others are climbing toward the light, you've been asked to descend into the parts of yourself that hold centuries of pain, not just from this life, but from every lifetime your soul has carried. That's why it feels like war. Not because you're losing, but because you're fighting for your truth against everything in you that was programmed to forget it. Let's name what this actually feels like. The confusion, the breakdowns, the dreams that feel more real than waking life, the psychic exhaustion that doesn't go away even after sleep, the loneliness that deepens after every breakthrough, the moments where your own skin feels like it can't hold what's rising inside you. These aren't symptoms of failure. These are signs of recalibration. You are being emptied so you can be rebuilt from within. And for people like us, those marked with shadow codes and truth frequencies, awakening strips away every layer of who we thought we had to be until only what is real remains. So why does it have to be this hard? Because you're not just waking up for yourself. You're breaking ancestral contracts. You're dissolving timelines of suppression. You're holding the energy of change in a collective field that resists change with everything it has. And that resistance is where the pressure comes from. You think you're losing your mind, but in reality, you're detaching from the mind you are trained to live through. The mind that filtered your power to keep it safe, digestible, polite. Let me ask you something. What if your breakdowns were really your breakthroughs in disguise? Making sure no lie could survive the truth you came here to embody. This is the secret reason your awakening feels like war. You are collapsing your false self in real time. And that collapse feels like death because on some level it is. The identity that was built for survival cannot exist in the vibration of your truth, and so it fights, it resists, it screams, it negotiates, it tells you to quit, it tells you you're too much, that you'll never be understood. But that voice is not your soul. It's your conditioning. It's the matrix inside your own mind trying to hold on. And your job now, your sacred role, is to keep breathing through that resistance and refuse to betray yourself again. What most people call spiritual bypassing is survival dressed up in cosmic clothes. It's the avoidance of darkness by clinging to pretty words. You were never going to get away with that. Not you, not with the depth you hold, not with the eyes that see straight through illusion, not with the rage that knows what injustice feels like before words are spoken. The reason the light didn't work is because your soul knew. You needed the full initiation, the kind that remakes you, not just realigns you. What most people call spiritual bypassing is survival dressed up in cosmic clothes. It's the avoidance of darkness by clinging to pretty words. You were never going to get away with that. Not you, not with the depth you hold, not with the eyes that see straight through illusion, not with the rage that knows what injustice feels like before words are spoken. The reason the light didn't work is because your soul knew. You needed the full initiation, the kind that remakes you, not just realigns you. And here's where it turns. Eventually, the war becomes something else. Not peace exactly, but power. Not ease, but clarity. You begin to walk with a different posture, a different gaze. You stop trying to be fixed and you start forging yourself. You stop asking how to escape the pain and you start asking what it's trying to initiate in you. And from that place, something wild begins to happen. You start to feel ready, not healed, but equipped. That's when the war begins to feel like training. That's when you realize maybe you were never broken. Maybe you were always becoming. So now I'll ask you the one question that can change the shape of your path. If you stopped trying to escape your shadow and started building your strength through it, what would your power actually look like? The dark gift of remembrance. Why you were always going to be different. There comes a moment after the collapse, after the war, within your soul has left you stripped of everything false, when something ancient stirs. It doesn't arrive with fireworks, it doesn't announce itself with words. It arrives quietly, like a whisper through your bones, and in that whisper is a truth you always knew but could never explain. You were never meant to be like them, not because you were better, not because you were above, but because you remembered. Remembrance is the final stage of the dark chosen one's awakening. It is not remembering facts, names, or lifetimes. It is remembering essence. Remembering that beneath the pain, the disconnection, the shame, and the silence, there was always a current of something more, something sacred, something terrifyingly real. And this remembrance is your true gift. It is what makes the darkness different for you. Others get lost in it. You became it. You walked through it, and instead of being swallowed, you stared it in the face and said, "Show me what I forgot." And it did. This is why you've always felt like an outsider. Why no group, no belief system, no spiritual dogma ever fully fit. Because deep down, you never needed to be taught. You needed to remember. And when you remember, you start to see through everything. The roles people play, the masks they wear, the illusions they cling to. You don't judge it, but you know. And that knowing becomes your compass. You're not looking for answers anymore. You're becoming the answer you were always seeking. But this path comes with a cost. Remembering who you are means grieving who you were trained to be. It means letting go of the safety that came from playing small. It means walking away from the people who only knew how to love your wounds, not your wildness. It means being willing to live without a script, to speak truth that may cost you connection, to follow an inner voice so strong that no outer chaos can drown it out. This is not easy. It's sacred, and sacred things are earned. The gift of remembrance is not gentle, it's disruptive. It awakens everything. You begin to recall the power you had as a child, the clarity in your emotions, the visions you dismissed, the sensations you labeled as weird. You begin to see that your gifts weren't later. They were always there, but the world didn't know how to receive them. And so you hid them from yourself. Now they're coming back, not as explosions, but as revelations, not to overwhelm you, but to reintegrate you. That's the gift. The remembering isn't just about your soul, it's about your mission. You didn't come here to be accepted, you came here to activate. And sometimes that means walking into a room and making the whole field shift without saying a word. Sometimes that means losing what once gave you comfort because you've outgrown its frequency. And sometimes that means standing in the fire of your own becoming without a guide, without a map, just your gut and your gods walking beside you, silently cheering. You were always going to be different. You didn't forget that. You just forgot why. So let me ask you now, as we close this chapter and open the next, if you stopped running from your difference and started honoring it as your design, what kind of world could you actually build? Because that's what comes after the pain, after the war, after the loneliness, a choice to live not just as someone who survived the dark, but as someone who became it, and in doing so, became the kind of light this world has never seen.